we're more than halfway up a 4,000-foot wall in the middle of the Canadian wilderness. Uh, no wind, continued good weather, which is really important for this kind of climbing. If it's snowing, even a little bit, like all of a sudden there's snow, like all that's the face kind of acts as a catchment for the snow, and it all kind of funnels down and runs down and kind of spin drifts down, and it doesn't have to snow very much to make it almost untenable on the wall. And everything gets wet, your gloves get wet, and the gear gets wet, and it's harder to see your protection. It's harder to see where to place your feet, and everything is harder. So we continue to have good conditions. We There was a little tiny ledge. I called it a three butt cheek ledge. It was basically the size of one chair that you would sit on, like a school chair, like a hard little seat. It was about 2.5 feet circular. And I led one pitch above that, 60-meter pitch, just like in the dark, just questing, trying to find some place we could spend the night, because I was like, oh God, we got to find something, because that down there that's going to be a miserable night if that's where we have to stay. Nothing, nothing. So eventually, like, gave up, fixed the ropes, rappelled back down. I was like, well, this is it. This is what we got to do. So the problem was, too, there was no ice and no snow. So we had to unpack everything from the backpack, keep everything clipped in, because you're just on this tiny little ledge. Like, one person is basically hanging from his harness while the other person does something. And then I had to like take the backpack up, and then Marco climbed up somewhere and filled it with snow. And then we had snow to melt. Then we kind of had to get like sort of situated, and we had to basically either hold the stove. We had the stove sitting on the little ledge kind of between us. So we each basically had like one butt cheek on. We're half hanging in our harness. You're trying not to burn yourself on the stove. You can't use a sleeping bag because we only have one sleeping bag, and it's sort of like a blanket. Um, Anything that falls is just gone. We used this whole backpack of snow to make the water, do that, get all situated. This takes hours, right? Like, this is like a 4-hour process to like do all of this. It's like midnight, and my feet are wet from, you know, being in my double boots all day and just working for so long, and everything. And so I I wanted to put dry socks on. So, and Marco did too. So it was a process. Like, you had to take turns, and you had to hand the other one person had to hold your boot for you while you took, your outer boot and all that stuff. Everything was clipped in everywhere. It's like living, very much like living on a big wall. Like, everything was clipped in all the time. All of a sudden, everything had some kind of clip loop on it. And we, when I was putting one of my outer boots back on, I had put clip loops on my double boots by kind of making a hole and then putting a little piece of cord on there. And we'd done that before we went up there, because I thought this might happen, that we might be in the situation where we needed to have everything clipped in. I got my finger in the pull loop, in the clip loop of my outer shell of my boot, and I'm pulling it on, and I feel it jerk. And when it jerks, the outer boot, like, it slips out of my hand. It just kind of like kicks out in front of me, and it's sort of hanging there in my headlamp for a moment, and then it's just gone. We didn't say anything. 5 seconds, and then you can guess what we were saying. And now the climb, in a moment, the climb went from this sort of incredibly fun. It almost felt like kind of type one fun up to that point. It just was. The climbing had been so good, the rock had been so good, our partnership had been so good, and then with that dropping of my boot, like, now it was dead serious. Now it was life or death, do or die. Was not fun anymore. And we didn't have enough equipment to go back down. We had a pretty light rack, and We sat there, we had a lot of time to talk about it. We tried to sleep. It was a miserable night. And in the morning, Marco just started. I basically took everything I could. I'd been carrying all our trash out, and so I had a little. I took like all the plastic bags from all our food things that we kind of accrued along the way, like just bread bags and things like that. Anything like that I could, I put over my sock. I took my inner boot right as my right inner outer boot. I took my inner boot off. I put all these plastic bags over my foot to basically make a vapor barrier because I was worried also about like losing about frostbite. Um, and then I put my foot back in the inner boot, and then we had a roll. Our first aid kit was a roll of climbing tape. That was all we had for first aid, and I used the entire roll of tape and just like went around my inner boot over and over and over again to try to bulk it up because it's just foam, and it did actually get pretty torn up in the end. But that's how I climbed. I couldn't put a crampon on it, obviously, though I tried to strap it on. I tried all kinds of things to get it to stay on, but it wouldn't stay on. So I basically, Marco led. It was 12 more pitches to the top, one of which was really traversing. On that one, on the traversing pitch, I fell and one of the ropes cut and one of the ropes didn't, thankfully, and it didn't completely cut in half, but it cut basically halfway through the sheath, through half the core. And we then got to the top of the technical climbing, and then we had a bunch of pitches of sort of 60, 70-degree ice, which were a total nightmare with one crampon. And it took us all day. We got to the top, and right at dusk, we made a snow shelter, and now the storm started. And this had also affected our descent plan. So our descent plan had been to go down a certain way over the Stutfield Glacier, make some rappels, and get back to our skis and where we'd left our skis. But now I couldn't use skis because I didn't have a boot. We had to walk back to the Icefields Parkway.